可能啊，我这样的话，一换政府，我第一个 college 就 upgrade University College Bandar。Okay, come back. Now, let's look at questions of last exam. See, is this difficult or is this easy? I look at the question, I find it very easy lah. But I just don't know why student cannot pass. Now, part A, page 148. Part A. Okay, for the inventory count arrangement of Lily window glass, identify and explain 6 deficiency, and then provide a recommendation to address each deficiency. So the total marks will split equally between each part. So we have 6 marks to identify and explain. So usually when they say identify and explain, then you will have to get from the case. So when you explain deficiency, you talk about consequences. Okay, talk about consequences. Now give a recommendation on how you will resolve the problem. So it's just on how you improve it. Alright, Lily Window Glass is a glass manufacturer which operates from a large production facility where it undertakes continuous production 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they are round the clock. They didn't stop one, okay? Now also on this side, there are 2 warehouses where the company's raw materials and finished goods are stocked. Lily's year end is 31st December. Now Lily is finalizing arrangement for the year end inventory count, which is to be undertaken on 31st December 2012. The finished windows are stored within 20 aisle of the first warehouse. The second warehouse is large piles of raw material such as sand used in manufacture of the glass. Now the following arrangements have been made for the inventory count. Now the warehouse manager will supervise the count as he is most familiar with the inventory. There will be 10 teams of counters, and each team will contain 2 members of the staff, 1 from finance and 1 from manufacturing department. None of the warehouse staff or other than the manager will be involved in the count. Each team will count an aisle of finished goods by counting up and then down each aisle. As this process is systematic, this is not felt that the team will need to flag areas once counted. So the aisle is, you go to IKEA before, then you know that they arrange things in an aisle. So you want to take the goods, so one person count from one end, the other person count from the other end. So flagging is like marking, you flag is to mark, okay, so they're saying that you will not be marking the goods once you have counted. Now once the team has finished counting an aisle, they will hand in their sheets and will be given a set for another aisle of the warehouse. So in addition to the above, to assist the inventory counting, there will be 2 teams of counters from the inventory audit department, and they will perform inventory count. Now the count sheets are sequentially numbered, and the product codes and descriptions are printed on them, but there's no quantities. If the counters identify any inventory which is not in the sheets, then they are to enter the item on the separate sheets which is not numbered. Once all counting is complete, the sequence of the sheets is checked, and any additional sheets are also handed in at this stage. All the sheets are completed in ink. Now, any damaged goods identified by the counters will be too heavy to move to a central location. Hence, they'll be left where they are. But the counter is to make a note on the inventory sheets detailing the level of the damage. Now, as Lily undertakes continuous production, there will continue to be movements of raw mats and finished goods in and out of the warehouse during the count. Now, these will be kept to a minimum where possible. The level of WIP in manufacturing plant is assessed by warehouse manager. It is likely that there will be an immaterial balance. In addition, the raw mat quantities are to be approximated by measuring the height, the width of the raw material piles. Now, in the past, this task has been undertaken by specialists. However, the warehouse manager feels confident that he can perform this task. So that's the case. So when the examiner writes the case, she put in some of the weak point, and she also tried to cover up some weak point by telling them that there are some good point. Okay. Now you just need to look for 6 deficiency. Now why not you try picking up any of the 6? So just give you 2 minutes. Just write the number at the side. I won't ask you. Don't worry. Okay. Then later I'll tell you. See whether what you pick will be acceptable. 哎呦，昨天给吃拉妈的。Okay, now we look for 6. See, I would usually prefer there are 6 points which are very obvious from the case study. Okay, now but I look at the examiner's answer. I notice she even bring in answers which are quite imaginative. Imaginative in the case that, like, because they didn't say, so you assume they didn't do. Now, these sort of things are very old style of answering. That's those days is my kind of answer when I'm a student. That's why I told you the examiner is very old-fashioned. Okay, she appears to me also not quite updated. Okay, with the style that she's doing. And one of the answers that she wrote at the back also, I felt it was an outdated answer, not referring to the latest standard. Okay, now. So anyway, that could be a good news. Good news in the sense that means you have more flexibility in your answer. Okay, so but you should always focus on those obvious ones. Okay, I'll tell you what you mean by things which are not so obvious. That is purely imaginative. Okay, now they mentioned that the count sheets are completed in ink. Okay, the count sheets are completed in ink. So in her answer, she said one of the weaknesses is the counters did not sign the count sheet. Okay, but I think that is quite too far for me to actually imagine whether they sign or not. You never say what. You just say that they are completed in ink. So that means they are using pen. So whether they sign or not is not clear. Yes, you know. Now, but I think she don't want to put there the count sheets are not signed. Because the moment she write like that, then you know that's a weakness already. Yes, you know. So probably she thought of leaving it out so that the student might use this as a point. Okay. So that is what I'm just trying to give as a comment. Okay. So I would try to go for those points which are more obvious one. Okay. For example, having the manager as the supervisor, it's an obvious point of lacking segregation of duty. Okay, because this manager is from the warehouse. He knows in and out everything in the warehouse. And if he's a supervisor, he's able to play a lot of tricks. So I think this can be dangerous. Okay, so you might want to use another guy as a supervisor rather than a manager. Okay, now then they mentioned that we have 10 teams of counters that they will count based on the aisle. Okay, so whatever aisle they go and count, after they count, they move to another aisle, they move to another aisle. So this shows to me that there's no proper assignment, because if you don't assign the team, that means you count as your wish. Okay, so if you count as your wish, then there's a risk that maybe you thought that the aisle is counted, and then another guy thought that this is counted, but actually both of them didn't count. You know, so that's why this could be a problem over here. Okay, so it would be better that you assign. Then number two, okay, if you don't assign properly, you may not know whether the staff actually is well versed with inventory or not. Okay, now then you also can notice that the two members they have in the team are all coming from different departments. Now the reason why we must have two members is because we want to maintain segregation of duty. But having two members not from warehouse at all is not a good idea, because they may not be so well versed with the stock. So later they don't know how to identify stock, whether the stock is okay or not, then is it slow moving, is it damaged, they may not know. Okay, so, you know? So all this could be a problem, okay? Could be a problem. Now, the internal auditor, okay, internal auditors are there. Now, internal auditor's job is not there to count the stock. Right? The internal auditor's job is the same as external auditor's job. The only difference is they are just from the internal side only. You know? So by right, internal auditors should be there to observe the stock take, just like what external auditors is doing. But now you are getting internal auditor to do the counting. Then what is the point of having internal auditor? Then what's the difference between internal auditor and the rest of the team? So that's why internal auditor should not be there to count. It's there to observe the count. You see, not? Now then they also mentioned to you that whatever additional things are recorded in sheets which are not numbered. So again, this will give rise to flexibilities of the sheets be replaced later on. Okay? Now, they did mention that the count is continuous. Okay, the count is continuous, so there's no stop, and of course no stop will increase the risk of cuts-off problem. Okay, that you may miscount, you double count. Okay, now they even mentioned about the work that is undertaken by specialists will now be taken by the manager. Now these are some of the points that which is quite obvious, like very obvious, okay, that you should use them as your answer. Now by just going through like that, we already have 7 points. Okay, you even can talk about other things, like for example, they did mention about damaged items are not being segregated. All these are possible answers. You know, like they say that the sheets are not completed, are not signed. So even though imaginative, but examiner will accept this as an answer. But you must understand, you only need 6. So this is her style. she will always give a case study that you can have 10 answers inside, but I only need 6 answers like that, because so it would be easier for you in that way. Okay, now so let's try. A. Okay, we will be putting down the deficiencies in the inventory count at Lily. Recommendation. So write those that you feel most confident, that you feel is very sure is not right. You write those first. Okay, now so there are 6 points that we need. Okay, alright, maybe I'll start with the warehouse manager. Now warehouse manager will supervise the count. Now this is identified. Agree? Now you must explain what? Okay, so explain why this is a problem. Now he has much authority over the warehouse operation, and having him to supervise can increase his opportunities to manipulate the count results. To conceal any irregularities in the warehouse. Now this is explaining. So my recommendation is probably simple. You feel he's not a right person, then don't get him. Okay, so probably we should suggest that another appropriate member not from the warehouse to supervise the count. So you can give example like who, okay? E.g. maybe you may have the internal audit manager or the accountant, okay? So you just give an example of any person that might be suitable, okay? This one, 2 marks. Okay, number 2. Now, the count team comprised of 2 members, one from finance and one from manufacturing, without any member from the warehouse. Okay, now again, this is what they say lah. So we look at this as lacking of inventory experience can increase of risk of the error in counting. So this is a problem that we see. So in that case, my recommendation is what? Now probably we suggest that one member in the team shall be from the warehouse. Now only one, not both. Now I don't want to touch on the allocation of the 10 teams because I got enough points. So in that case, I just use this recommendation to add on. So probably we just say that one member from the warehouse should be inside the accounting team, but team must be assigned to each out in advance to ensure no member of the warehouse shall count area they are responsible to. So this is meant for segregation of duty. Okay, so you don't count your own area. Alright, you don't count your own area. Okay, now so this is just as an add-on to enhance further my answer. Okay, now number 3. Now the internal audit department will be involved in the count. Now internal audit department will involve in the count with 2 teams being members from the internal audit. Now, but their duty should be observing count. So to count the inventory themselves, they would not be able to observe properly. Okay, so that's the problems that we see. So what is our recommendation then? So recommendation is very simple. The internal auditor must not form part of the accounting team. Instead, they should be independent of the management to observe that the count is correctly carried out and test the counting procedure. Okay, so this is what internal auditor is supposed to do. Alright, so the next issue is issues on the sheets which are not numbered. Okay. So if sheets are not numbered, then the risk is they can be easily exchanged, because later on you can just throw away the real one and then issue another one and write the number on. So in that case, the risk is it can be easily forged, it can be easily exchanged. Okay, so this is number 4. more energetic but still slow. 因为 energy 哦，讲什么 ？Okay, so I move on. If you miss later, you copy again. Okay. If you miss, go YouTube and pause. Now, number 5, the separate sheets used to record unlisted inventory is not given pre-numbered. Sounds funny. Pre-numbered sequential numbers. Okay, so they're not given pre-numbered sequential numbers. Now, consequently, it can be easily changed. Subsequent to the count. So they can just replace with another piece of sheets and write down the numbers. Okay? Now, so all the additional count sheets shall be sequentially pre-numbered. That's all. Okay? So that's the recommendation. Just have it numbered. Now, inventory continuously moving in and out during the count. Okay, and this can increase the risk of same inventory the one not flagged I didn't identify just now. Okay, the same inventory be counted twice or left uncounted. Okay, now the cut-off can also be easily be wrong. Okay, this is an important problem. I mentioned just now, but I didn't highlight that they say they did not flag the inventory. I put down number 8, okay? Because marking of inventory is very important, okay? Now, so we are not sure whether how you want to make arrangement. Now, if possible, Lily shall ensure a short window of time where all movement shall cease to allow the count and the cut off be correctly determined. Okay. Now it can still be difficult lah, but if possible, that's the best recommendation. Since you just need to recommend, okay? So that's my recommendation. You do arrangement, okay? That how you make sure that it will cease. If not, then you probably have to identify different sections so that once you have a cutoff period, that anything that you count up to there, once they issue after that, you must correctly identify the status later on so that you don't mix up, okay? Because if not, then there'll be a risk. Then maybe now you count the stock as raw mat. Then later the raw mat being issued went into WIP. Then you count again. That means you're counting on the same stock. So it's the raw mat. Then after that you issue to WIP, you count again. Then the WIP you counted, issue to finished good, you count again. So you're double counting, triple counting the same stock. So at least if you can make sure that there is a short time that you cease, you count all these, okay? Or not, then you just make sure that the count is properly identified for cutoff, okay? Now number 6, the raw material stock would be approximated by the warehouse manager when this was previously by an expert. Now, lack of competency could lead to an unreasonable estimate of your inventory quantity be established. So what is your suggestion now? Get a specialist, okay? So I would recommend that specialist shall be engaged to estimate the inventory balance for raw material. Okay, 12 mark. Is this tough? Appears easy, appears easy. Okay, so now you have got 12 marks out of 50. So very close to passing here. Very close to passing. Okay, we're gonna get another 18 marks now. Now turn to the next page. Okay, the next part is another part of different section. So they ask us in B. Describe procedures to be undertaken by the auditor during the inventory count in order to gain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. And C, for the audit of inventory cycle and the year-end inventory balance, describe 4 audit procedures that could be carried out using CAATs, the potential advantages, potential disadvantages. So that's the 12 marks on CAATs. Okay, the description says that you are the audit senior of Daffodil and you're responsible for the audit of the inventory for Lily, and you will be attending the year-end inventory count. Now, in addition, your manager wishes to utilize CAAT for the first time for control and substantive testing in auditing inventory. Okay, so B. Now, it's just asking for procedures to do with account. So what would you all do during the count? Now remember, we say number 1, on the day of the count, my job is to observe, right? Okay, so observe that Lily's staff are carrying out the inventory count according to its plan or instruction. Agree? Because the inventory counting procedure is divided into 3 stages: before, during, and after. So before the count, we should review the plan and then discuss with them any changes. So on the day of the count, when we are there, we should look at them how they do the count. Correct? Not? Okay. So when you observe the way they do the count, if you come across anything like they didn't follow plans, instruction, or so on, you should resolve it. Okay. For example, talk to the supervisor. Okay. So example. Now, if they do not follow the instruction, then you should speak to the supervisor to resolve the issue. Okay, you know there's a problem, then you don't let the problem persist, just solve the problem. Okay, now then usually on the count you must test the count for completeness and for existence. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take the count sheets, right? Now select samples of inventory from the count sheets. Then you should physically inspect them and count its quantity and confirm that the quantity is tallied per the count sheet. So we are doing this to check what? Existence, right? Because on the count sheets you recorded that the inventories are there. So you want to know that the inventory is actually there. So you do this, okay? Now you want to know whether completeness is there. Then what would you do? Now you will select from the actual inventory, then you count them, agree to the count sheets that they've been correctly recorded. Now the certain thing we study, you cannot write because it does not make sense. There's a main difference between if you study by remembering hard in the note and doing exam. Okay, for example, in the note we say you should do a tour and see whether all inventories have been marked to see whether is there any area not counted. Okay, now you can't do this here because you read the case study, you know already they are not doing that. They say that they are not going to flag the area. So how do you know whether which part is being marked, which part is not being marked? See, the moment you write like that, then you're giving a very bad impression to your marker. That hey, you don't understand the question or you're not reading. Because that means you're very ignorant. So that's why you must write answer that makes sense. This is the reason why I say sometimes students they study but they don't use their brain because they don't think that hey, this one cannot understand? Okay, so that's why you must see carefully. Now, but one thing that they did mention here is the damaged inventory. Now they will not segregate the damaged inventory, but instead they mention, sorry, let me go back to the point. Which paragraph is that? Yeah, any damaged goods identified will be too heavy to move to a central location, but they will make a note on the inventory sheets detailing the level of damage. You see now? So what we probably can do is we can probably identify those inventory that the counters determine as damage by tour round the warehouse. Okay, now confirm that these are noted as damage in the count sheets. Now on the day of the count, you have to do a cut-off. This is a year-end inventory count. Okay, so normally we'll just say perform an inventory cut-off procedure. That means you just need to know what is the last batch that comes in and what's the batch that goes out. Okay, so usually we just want to take note. Okay, so by taking note of the last GRN, GDN, so you know exactly what's the last batch comes in, so you can identify the movement, okay, or any inventory movement tickets. Okay, so that's the 6 points that we have. Now, other things that might be relevant that you want to put it down, you can also put it down. Okay. Now the manager also will be assessing the estimate. Okay, the manager will assess the estimate. So I think on that day, you should probably discuss with the warehouse manager on how he approximate the inventory balance for the raw mat. Okay, because this time the manager will do it, not the specialist. So you have to follow on that. So I think I must be convinced that the manager is able to do it. Okay. Now then at the same time you should evaluate the reasonableness. Okay. Use your handphone and snap pictures of the physical inventory, because since you are using an estimation, so end of the day is through what you see with your eyes. This can actually be a very good evidence later on, because you can never go back to time with it. So the best way to keep the evidence is take a photograph, and it's what's so difficult about taking photograph nowadays, right? Because you know, so I may even suggest that take photograph evidence of this inventory. Okay, now identify if there is any inventory held by Lily on behalf of third party, but they are still in the warehouse. If yes, confirm to the count sheets that they are not included in your inventory balance. Now on the day of the count, it's important you got to make sure that the count sheets are all returned back collected. You see now? So you just need to inspect the count sheets that they are all completed, signed, that there's no gap in the sequential number. Okay, so this is what you do. Alright, now you just need 6 answers. So I've given up to 9. So you do not need to write answer that we say 有头有尾. See, some people thought of should I write as though that I complete one process? It's okay one. You can write answer like you are hanging. That means if I read your answer, you like do halfway like that, but it's okay what. You just want up to 6 marks only. I can't be writing everything for you. I just write until enough, then I stop there. Okay? So this is what you need to remember. Okay. Now, so this is to do with B. That's the inventory count procedure. Alright, now in part C they're asking, now describe the 4 procedure that CAAT could be used when you audit the inventory. Now, more specific okay? When examiner asks CAAT, okay, when examiner asks CAAT, the answer can actually be test data. Okay, the answer can also be embedded audit facility. The answer can also be audit software. Because that's if I read your question, that's why I understand. You say CAATs, but when I look at her answer is actually asking audit software. Okay, that means her understanding of CAT may not be that good. Okay, so she only writes answer about audit software. Alright, so she only say that how audit software can be used to audit inventory. Now anyway, if you've written TD and EAF also, there's no issue. And the question clearly said that you are using it for control. Okay, you're using it for control, and you're using it for substantive testing. Okay, so a very careful student, after reading the requirement of the question, they will also disagree with some of the answer the examiner written. The examiner did mention about determine using the computer software inventory days, inventory aging. That is not substantive testing anymore. That is analytical procedure. Okay, but anyway, I just want to highlight to you that shows to us that when examiner writes the question, she is not so particular about the wording. So she write at the end. I think she also forgot that actually that's what she's asking. Okay, so that's why her answer tends to be more general. Okay, so when you do the answer, you try don't be too stressed up. Okay, you just do it like a very normal paper only. So I think probably that's the better attitude. Okay, now so the first thing that we're gonna use the CATs. Now, so 4 audit procedures that you can carry out with CAT. 4 audit procedure. So I will not write down test data EAF. Okay, so they just want 4 procedure. Now, for example, I will use audit software to compare the actual sales of inventory after the year end with the inventory valuation at the year end. This is subsequent sales, and report cases of inventory sold below its valuation. Can do that, right? Computer can do that, okay? Now you just need to write anything that you can do with stock, that the computer can do it for you, okay? Computer can do it for you, alright? Now, number two, now for example, I can use the audit software to calculate the inventory days for different lines of inventory, okay, or your aging, or aging for different lines of inventory, and then probably can compare to the prior year and report any significant difference. Okay, now I can use Audit software to sample inventory for purpose of testing inventory valuation. So it's meant for sampling purpose. Now I can also use Audit software to cast the inventory list to confirm its arithmetical accuracy. So basically, anything that you can do or you want to do, that computer can do it for you. That's your answer. And to make sure that my answer is in line with what they ask, that's why I stress on the word use Audit software. See, I just keep on telling you I'm using the software. I'm using the software. So this is to show to you that this is computer assisted audit technique. If not, you say cast the inventory list. Then casting inventory list, what different are you trying to say that this is using Audit software? Are you trying to say this is computer assisted? So decide to show that it's computer assisted, I stress that I'm using Audit software. Understand? Okay. Now, so this is the part to do with the procedure. Okay. Number two, I shouldn't label 1, 2, 3, 4. Number two, the advantages of using CADs. Now, what's the good thing of using computer techniques? Okay, what's the good thing of using computer techniques when it comes to your auditing? Now, of course, one is the skill that you're able to test. Okay, so CATs are efficient. So it allows a large volume of data transaction be tested in very short period of time. Now that's why if you remember when we talk about sampling, we did mention that population audit is possible. One of it is when you are able to be very efficient in your work and one of the condition is the use of CATs. Okay, so this is one. So auditing 100% of the entire account balance or class of transaction is possible. Now, this kind of CATs that we want to do, you need to set it up. Okay, talk about embedded audit facility. You got to get people to program it. Okay, the apps must be programmed, but you need program one time only. You don't program every time you audit. So the programming is one-off. It's one-off investment cost. Okay, so there will be a one-off investment cost to set up the CAT that we can use them to all the future audits. So in long run, it can be cheaper. Okay, so in long run, it can be cheaper. Now, number 3, when we use CAT, the approach we use is auditing through or auditing around. Auditing through, because you're going to audit the system. And obviously, if you're going to audit the system, that means the results is more reliable. You are just looking at the input and the output to know whether the system is okay or not. But how can you be so sure until you test the system? So that's why CAT enhance reliability of your evidence. Okay. Now the CAT is an auditing through computer approach where the system is being audited. Okay, now this provides a more reliable audit evidence than merely testing the inputs into and the outputs from the system. Okay, now using things like embedded audit facility is part of your CATs. So what's the good thing of that? Now you can have a very continuous testing. You can have a surveillance system that is always there. Now auditor cannot be there all the time, but the system can be there all the time. Right now, you look at things like, for example, SCARF. I don't have to be there, but I have a system to monitor. Because so I look at ITF. I don't have to be there, but the system is there. So all this is again enhancing the quality of the outcome. Because so the use of embedded audit facility allow the entities CIS to be tested or evaluated in the continuous basis, and this provides greater assurance for auditor to put reliance over entities' internal control. Now, these are example of things we learn, okay, about CATs and so on. But of course, when we learn all this, I didn't put them down together and say, okay, these are advantages. So now I'm putting them down together and show these are advantages. You see, so that's the difference between if you only study blindly, read, and student that they try to think and link them together. So if you think, then you say, actually all this I studied before, okay? Then you know it. By linking them, you've got the answers, okay? Now, of course, the thing that you can enhance yourself in this is you practice more. Do more past year, read more answer, then you'll be better in these things, okay? Now, so that is to do with advantage. Okay, what kind of disadvantage that we're going to see here? Now, the disadvantage comes from some of the advantage that we see. Number one, you can say CAT is efficient and so on, but you can also say it's technical. It's not easy. You may not know how to do it. Can say not? So the disadvantage is now the auditor needs to ensure there are IT proficient employees to carry out audit procedure using CATs. Now this may increase the firm's overhead. Example like training. Now, developing a system for you, okay? Developing a system for you. That we say put down an initial investment cost can be fine if I expect that the system will be there for long, or you will keep us as auditor for long. But this I think no one can guarantee, right? So there will always be a risk that they may change the audit firm. There's always risk that they change the system. Then whatever you invested may not be able to use anymore. You see not? So there'll always be a risk that the entity changes its CIS, for example, inventory system, or changing a new auditor. Does the CAT that we have developed would be wasted? Then there will be a failure to recover the initial investment costs. Now we also look at risks like corrupting their system, right? Now, so some of the CATs involve a real life interaction with entity system. Example like maybe live test data technique, and this poses danger of corrupting entities' data. Okay. Now, some of the CATs may be incompatible with Lily's inventory system. This may cause its systems to crash. Okay, and obviously these are a problem the client can blame us. Okay, and Lily could help our firm be responsible for these problems. Alright, so these are some of the issues concerning CAGs. Okay, so just okay, so we're just suggesting the procedure, advantage, disadvantage. Right, that's your question 1. Okay, we move on and see the next question. Just turn to next page. Okay, now question 2 is actually a straightforward 10 marks requirement. Okay, now 3 marks is, they say, state 3 rights of an auditor. Now, rights of an auditor means the power of an auditor. Okay, so as auditor, what power do you have? And you are not supposed to discuss those related with resignation or removal. Okay, I don't need to talk about resignation or removal, because, for example, if you talk about removal process, what kind of rights that you have when you have removal process? The rights will be, you'll be able to give a representation to explain why you must not be removed, and then expect that the company will send it out to all the members, and you expect that the company will read it out. So all these are examples of your rights. Okay, so this is 3 marks. Okay, B. See, ISA 315, identifying and assessing risks of MM through understanding of entity and its environment, requires auditors to obtain an understanding of control activities. Control activities are policies and procedure that help to ensure companies' directives are being carried out, which are all designed to prevent, detect fraud. Example of control is like maintenance of control account. So a part of maintenance of control account, give 4 control that might help to prevent or detect fraud and error. That means any control. For example, segregation of duty, sequential pre-numbering of document, authorization, physical control. These are all control. You know how difficult is that? See, don't you think also we can just come out a lot of control. You can say, no? So there's the 4 marks over here. Okay. Now see what are the 3 limitations of audit. Okay. That's the one that we studied in the first chapter. Okay. Right. So we go through these. So question 2. A. Now what kind of rights you have? What kind of power do you think auditor needs to have so that you can do audit? You can do a statutory audit. For example, rights to access to entities, books of accounts, okay, and records. Agree? I mean, you must give us the power to access. If not, then how do you do the audit? So that's why auditor is given rights to access. Okay? Rights to receive all the communications pertaining to your board resolutions, companies resolutions, rights to attend general meeting, okay, rights to be heard in the general meeting. So there's a small part in the notes now, okay. Alright, so this is all about rights now, just 3 rights. Okay, B. Now the question one is to explain. So you cannot just say segregation of duty. So you must write down what is segregation of duty. So B. Now control. Okay, so what is segregation of duty? Having different employee to perform duties that are incompatible to be performed by a same person. So that's called segregation. We separate, okay, having 2 different persons to do duty. Now, but you cannot just say having 2 persons to do duty, then it's not segregation. Segregation is the duty is not supposed to be done by the same person. Okay? Or you can say that we try to segregate into 2 different persons so that you don't abuse the power. Also can. Okay? Now, we have things like authorization. Having an appropriate person with sufficient authority to review transaction and authorize them before it can be proceeded with. That's called authorization. Now, what is physical control? So physical is any control over the physical protection of the asset. Okay, so these are all controls over protecting assets physically. For instance, like what? Like having locks so that you prevent people from accessing. Okay, for example, like locating asset from being exposed to different hazard or risk. That is your physical control. Now, sequential pre-numbering, to have all document be given a sequential number in advance. Okay, so this is called sequential pre-numbering. Alright, C. Now they ask us to describe 3 limitations of external audit. Now what are the 3 limitations of external audit? Now you should be discussing first of all the nature of financial reporting, correct? So we did mention before that because of the nature of financial reporting, there's a lot of subjective, different way of estimating, very subjective treatment, a lot of different interpretations. So that gives rise to many possible ways of looking at the same thing. Okay, so this is the nature, that there are many subjective judgment or treatment of the financial statement matters, leading to different possible interpretations. Okay, and as a result of this, consequently, auditor cannot confirm that this treatment is correct, because they are just having too many possibilities. Okay, now then we also know that in audit we have practical limitation, we have legal limitation. So this is the nature of audit procedure, where we have practical limitation faced by the auditor. So what is the practical limitation? That auditor is not able to confirm completeness of information. Okay, so if the client is not telling us the truth, then really there's no way we can confirm that. Okay, so that's our practical limitation. Now you can also go on and talk about the same problem, the legal limitation. That auditor is not given any legal rights, even if he is suspicious of entity concealment of information. Example, there's no legal power to search. Okay, all right, so that's your question 2. Okay, now we take a short break, come back, then we look at other question.